So it was the customary belief was that any person out of ordinary who experienced the shortage of food for some period in time lost his mind, to go mentally sick, which led them to have illusion and see the humans as animal rather than human. And that's what makes them eat human. And because their need to fill the stomach, or they eat human flesh, they're already crazy. And they don't regain the right consciousness anymore. And when they regain their life, they don't regain their mind. It has destroyed already the proper being. And they always have that carving to eat human flesh, even though there's plenty to eat. And after years, they survive. They can survive with beaver and fish and everything. They behave ordinary people. But the carving to eat, the need to eat human flesh is so strong. They've already been crazy.
The winters on the northern plains of North America have challenged the people who dared call these lands home since their first arrival. Freezing winds and temperatures capable of killing people in minutes, dangerous ice, and large amounts of snowfall make winters in this land a deadly place to live for both man and beast. The native people were very familiar with the hardships caused by the bitter winters of these northlands. Although they managed to survive in this harsh climate, survival sometimes came at a cost. Starvation was not uncommon in these lands during the harsh winters. In these perilous days where the snow blotted out all signs of life and the cold bit at the skin, food shortages could cause some to resort to cannibalism to survive. Although starvation could lead some to eat their fellow man, there were cases where cannibalism occurred when a dark form of madness or evil would overtake its hosts. Those who chose to eat human flesh were seen with great disdain and often feared by the people of these lands, for it was believed that an ancient evil had overtaken them. The dark entity went by many names, including Wendigo. The stories the native people shared about this being went back as far as anyone could remember. It is said the Wendigo stalked the northern plains and forests of what is today Canada and United States, corrupting its victims by invading their thoughts and minds, overcoming them with the desire to kill and devour their fellow man. Many people would speak of nightmares where the Wendigo had come to them in their sleep and tried to drive them towards these dark temptations. The creature would often target the starving, sick, and ailing. It was believed these people were vulnerable to the Wendigo while in this weakened state. It would slowly work its way into their thoughts and dreams and eventually overtake them. Once the person had been overcome, the Wendigo was in control of its host. Murder and cannibalism soon followed, but the possessed being could not be satisfied, no matter how much it ate. It is said that with the more human flesh the possessed person consumed, their appearance would too gradually change. No longer a human, but becoming the Wendigo in both mind and body by way of this wicked indulgence. The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets, the Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. The lips it had were tattered and bloody. Unclean and suffering from supportations of the flesh, the Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. Basil Johnston, an Ojibwe teacher. It is said as the gluttonous creature feasted upon more and more human victims, it would also grow many times larger and stronger than an average person to the size of a giant. As the Wendigo grew, so did its appetite, leaving the creature in a constant state of hunger for flesh. The native people and European settlers both took the threat of the Wendigo very seriously. They had every reason to do so when the story of Swift Runner, a Cree hunter and trapper from Alberta, Canada, swept across the land in 1879. Swift Runner was a large man, standing 6'3", with a muscular build. By accounts, he was known to have been a good husband, father, and was well liked by the traders in the region. He lived within a short distance of a Hudson Bay's company post. In the spring of 1879, Swift Runner had left his winter camp, where he and his family had stayed for the winter, and traveled to a Catholic mission in St. Albert, Canada. He claimed that his family had starved to death over the winter, but people began to get suspicious of this story when they saw he did not appear to be malnourished, weighing well over 200 pounds. Further, the priest claimed the trapper was plagued with screaming fits and nightmares while he slept. Swift Runner told the priest he was being tormented by a Wendigo. People became suspicious and asked the Canadian Mounted Police to look into it. Swift Runner agreed to take the Mounties with him to his camp in the woods of northeast Edmonton. The police were led to one grave where they found the remains of Swift Runner's son. Still suspicious, they began to inspect the rest of the site. Soon they began to find bones, flesh, and bits of hair on the grounds. Some of the larger bones were snapped in half, and the marrow sucked out of them. Swift Runner was taken into custody, where he eventually told his story. He told of how a Wendigo had begun to haunt his dreams. The evil spirit compelled him to consume his family. After some time, the Wendigo gradually took control of him. Swift Runner was no longer there. Now there was only the Wendigo. First, it was revealed the Wendigo killed and devoured Swift Runner's wife. Next, the Wendigo forced one of Swift Runner's sons to butcher his younger brother. While this was taking place, the Wendigo hung his baby daughter from a pole by her neck with a cord while he pulled at her feet. Later, the Wendigo would kill Swift Runner's brother and mother-in-law, claiming to authorities the old woman had been a bit tough to eat. The horrified Mounties took Swift Runner and the mutilated remains as evidence to Fort Saskatchewan. There he made no attempt to hide his guilt and was sentenced to death. Swift Runner's camp had been near civilization. He could have easily returned to get supplies if starvation had been imminent. On the day of his hanging, Swift Runner appeared to be ready to get the deed over. He repeated to the crowd that had came to see the execution that he was guilty of the crimes. He was then hung to death. The trapper's body was buried far away from the town because it was believed the dreaded Wendigo could leave the body and find another host to inhabit. People in the United States and Canada were horrified as news of Swift Runner's crime spread through newspapers across the land. Those in the north were often afraid of the Wendigo possessing them. This fear was so great that it was not uncommon for the native people to call upon a special Wendigo hunter to end the lives of alien loved ones who they believed had been overcome by the evil entity. One of these Wendigo hunters was a Cree who had claimed to have killed 18 of these creatures in his lifetime. His name was Jack Fiddler, and he hunted the Wendigo with his son until he was 87 years of age. In 1907, Canadian authorities came to a tribal land and arrested him and his son for the murder of a Cree woman. Although the two pled guilty, they claimed that the woman had been possessed by a Wendigo and was on the verge of full transformation. In their testimony, the Fiddler stated that if they had allowed this to happen, she would have been a danger to her family and neighbors. During the course of the trial, the elder Fiddler managed to escape captivity. When he was found, it was discovered that the old Wendigo hunter had hung himself nearby. His son Joseph was eventually found guilty, although they had been following their native customs and had not been aware of Canadian law. Missionaries and traders attempted to overturn the sentence of death. Appeals did eventually secure Joseph's release, but the order to let him go did not come until 3 days after his death in 1909. Over time, Wendigo sightings and possessions began to diminish. The last published reports of Wendigo activity in Canada were recorded in Kenora, Ontario in 1940, at which time there was a major famine due to 3 consecutive harsh winters. To this day, people make claims of seeing the creature in northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and other northern regions of the United States and into Canada. The Wendigo was feared and known for many centuries prior to the Europeans coming to this land. Although civilization has advanced and people of the northern United States and Canada no longer struggle against the winters to survive as they once had, modern civilization and the systems that keep it in place are fragile. They can and do fail. In a situation where the people of these lands see their systems break down, causing fuel and food supplies to vanish, their experience will quickly resemble that of their predecessors from centuries past. When the winter bears down and the cold and hunger become an oppressive, unrelenting presence, will the people of this land find out the stories were true?
And when a person became to be in that state, he is no longer an ordinary human. And they say that the longer he is like that, he lost the human ordinarity. It doesn't bother him how cold it is. And in time, if he eats again and again, he eats the meat of the human flesh, it gets numb. And his heart became like ice.